Superhero shows are everywhere right now, but very few of them understand how to end. And that's what makes this interesting, because The Boys should be at its strongest point right now. It's deep into its run, the stakes are massive, and everything has supposedly been building up for years. But after watching Season 5 Episode 6, it's clear that The Boys isn't living up to its potential, and that right now it's fundamentally flawed. Because it doesn't feel like the story is building anymore. It feels like it's stalling in the past few episodes. And once you notice that, all the common criticisms, the pacing issues, the filler, the inconsistencies start to make a lot more sense. They're not separate problems, they all point to the same thing. The show has been writing itself into a corner. They have taken 6 episodes to set something up which could have been done in 3, maybe 4. But to understand that, I have to go back to what The Boys used to do so well. Early on the show felt tight, there was clear core conflict, the boys versus Homelander and Vought, and everything fed into that. Character arcs felt like they were progressing, the stakes were rising in a controlled way. It felt like the story was actually moving somewhere. Even when things escalated, it didn't feel random, it felt directed. Like every major moment was pushing the narrative forward rather than just existing for shock value. But over time that structure has started to loosen, and now instead of feeling like a story that's building towards something, it feels like a story that's trying to maintain itself. That's a huge difference, because stories don't fail when nothing happens. They fail when things happen but they don't change anything, and that's where The Boys is starting to struggle. One of the clearest signs of this is escalation. The show has always relied on pushing things further, more violence, more chaos, more extreme situations, but escalation only works if it leads to meaningful progression. And right now it often doesn't. It feels like the show is constantly trying to top itself but actually moving the story forward in a significant way. And that's where the pacing starts to break down. Because what feels like slow pacing isn't just about time, it's about delayed progression. The show has already set up major consequences, but it keeps holding them back. The greatest example of this is Homelander. For multiple seasons now, the show has been building towards him fully losing control. That's the natural direction of the story. Everything points towards escalation, real escalation, but instead of letting that happen, the show keeps circling around it, delaying it, stretching it out, holding it out of reach, and that creates a strange disconnect, because as a viewer you can feel where the story should be going, but the show isn't letting itself get there. This ties directly into character arcs, because when the story doesn't move forward, characters can't either. Now, to be fair, there are still strong moments. A-Train is probably the best example this season. His arc felt complete, his build-up, his development, and the payoff was fantastic. It moved. And because it moved, it worked. But that also highlights the problem with the rest of the show, because a lot of the characters don't feel like they're progressing in the same way. They feel stretched, held in place, like the story isn't ready to let them evolve yet, and that creates a sense of repetition. And this is where the consequences become really important. The show constantly sets up massive stakes, the world becoming more unstable, power shifting, everything getting worse. But those consequences don't always fully play out. They get delayed, contained, or softened, and that weakens the impact of everything. Because when consequences don't reshape the story, even big moments can start to feel temporary. This is why Season 4 got the reaction that it did. A lot of people point out the pacing issues, most episodes felt like filler. There was a growing sense that things weren't progressing as much as they should, and there were just unnecessary plot lines which led nowhere. And while the season still had some strong moments, it felt like the story was stretching itself too thin. That's where the structural issues really became visible, because the underlying system wasn't tight anymore. And now in Season 5 those same issues are still there. The season started well, there's momentum, it feels like things are finally starting to move. But as it goes on, especially by episode 6, you start to see the same pattern again. Plot lines getting stretched, conflicts getting delayed, and even when something significant happens, it doesn't always feel like it's pushing the story into a new phase. Episodes 4 and 5 could have easily merged into one, and a lot of episode 5 was just fan service for Supernatural fans, which while I enjoy, wasn't something to be doing in the final season. Episode 6 is another clear example. So much of this season has just been to set up the Vought Rising spin-off, which is a prequel taking place with Soldier Boy, and while I might be excited for it, in the final season it's a huge waste of time and effort which is ruining the setup for the finale. They have also seemingly abandoned Gen V, which set itself up to be this huge thing at the end of season 2, where supposedly the characters from this would be largely involved, but now their show's been cancelled, and we have 2 episodes left and still no appearances from them. Where the hell are Gen V? Marie Moreau is supposedly nearly as strong as Homelander, and has had just a few small mentions. There are so many characters we don't care about, and the entire plotline with Sage is just ridiculous. She's supposed to be the smartest person on Earth, but her big plan is to live in a bunker just so she can read, and she couldn't think that Soldier Boy still might give the V to Homelander. She really doesn't seem that smart. And this is where the idea of being written to a corner really comes in. The show has escalated its world so much that it's now too difficult to resolve it cleanly. Homelander is too central, the conflict is too big, and there are too many moving parts. So instead of progressing naturally, the show delays, it stretches things out, it holds everything in place. But the longer you delay progression, the harder it becomes to deliver a satisfying payoff. And that's why all the criticisms, the pacing, the filler, the inconsistencies, they all point back to the same thing: structure. Not individual scenes, not single episodes, but the underlying structure of the story itself is now fundamentally flawed. Because at the end of the day, what makes a story work isn't just what happens, it's whether what happens actually changes something. Whether it builds, whether it progresses, whether it moves towards an ending. Everything right now is so messy, and it pains me to see The Boys like this. The inconsistency is just too apparent not to address it. The Boys feels like it's holding itself in place, trying to stay big and dramatic and leave everything for the last 2 episodes. And that's why it's starting to fall apart. A great season of TV doesn't wait for greatness, but strikes it at the start. Look at some of the best final seasons of television. Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, Mad Men. What made them great wasn't waiting for the last episode, but consistency throughout. This was where shows like Game of Thrones and Stranger Things created some of the worst final seasons and last episodes of all time. And I fear The Boys may be heading in this direction, but I hope I'm wrong. However, unless they can truly wrap everything up in these final 2 episodes, I'm afraid The Boys will not have this great season finale everyone is hoping for, but I would gladly be wrong. Even if these episodes have been subpar so far, the end of Season 5 Episode 6 shows promise, and perhaps Homelander's rage will finally be unleashed in Episode 7. I truly hope The Boys stick the landing and create an ending that we've all been hoping for.